connoisseurs. Go figure.
So what you're saying then is that the snobbery of the wine cults is just that kind of passive aggressive rage. It's like, I don't like this stuff, so therefore I'm taking it out on you. So
well, it's the same as coffee. Even the greatest coffee snobs in the world will tell you coffee tastes kind of nasty, but still you're somehow compelled to drink it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's if you don't drink the right kind of coffee or you drink the right kind of wine, it defines your social position in some areas, which is kind of weird. But I mean, having said that, I don't mind a glass of, red with some Italian food or something. I mean, it's great, but
maybe there's a strange kind of chemistry that happens between wine and Italian food. One might even call it alchemy.
Yes, I am just doing all I can to get my benefit of my $10 a month I give to Amazon. And so one of the books I read over the last week was called The Last Alchemist by Eric. I'm going with Hamre, Hamre. He is he's a fiction writer. And again, I'm trying to kind of get away from the zombie apocalypse stuff because I found out I really like those. So this is a little bit from Goodreads. David, a broken, depressed MBA student, is giving a secret assignment by his university professor. 40 years earlier in the 1970s, one of the world's richest men vanished from the face of the earth. The billionaire had just completed a lecture series called The Principles of Wealth at Oxford University. The question is, did he share something he shouldn't have shared in that last lecture? And what really happened the day he disappeared? And that is the premise behind this book. Kind of an enjoyable read. Some of the early things the author didn't tie in until the very end. It was almost like, hey, I need an extra 10 pages. I'll give you 5 at the beginning and 5 at the end that don't tie into the book. But the middle section there, the 95% of it in the middle, was actually a pretty good kind of whodunit mystery. So The Last Alchemist, pretty decent read.
All right, a little branching out from Seth there into still fiction, lest he read something that actually happened in the world. But that's good. And I have no segue, I'm sorry, Miles, into spring cleaning.
Well, it's spring. Well, yeah, it is spring, right?
Yeah, technically.
Spring was a couple of days ago, yeah. I got into my garage today.
You Americans may know it as a garage.
Yeah, that. That was not a pleasant thing to do. Oh, we get a lot of dust here. But having said that, I dug through stuff that I didn't remember seeing for years and years and years, and I found a brand new in-the-box scanner, Xerox scanner from 10 years ago that I hadn't even taken out of the box. And that led me down the journey to try to make it work with Linux, and that didn't end well.
Could you return it?
Sure. Why Amazon?
So wherever you try taking it to Walmart.
There are two parts about that story that are quintessentially American. One, that you had a probably at the time $500 to $600 device in your garage that you never opened. How American of you. And secondly, you moved to a desert and complained about the amount of dust. You are, Miles, you may have been born an Australian, but you have become an American.
Oh, hand on heart. Yep. That would be me.
All right. And that's it. Now we're going to talk about NAS. So the first question you might ask is, what is a NAS? NAS simply stands for Network Attached Storage. So we're going to get our propeller beanies on today and earn the geek in our GeekRant title. And we have talked a little bit off and on about this sort of subject over the years. Guys, this week, I think, marks my 10-year anniversary. No, 8-year anniversary as a podcaster. So the first show was released April 1st, 2010, but we had actually recorded it a week or two earlier. So I have now been a podcaster for 8 years, and we've been doing this show for about 6 years. So when I say we've talked about this in the past, there's a pretty broad range of the past there. So the faithful listeners may remember these sort of discussions, but the new people may not. And so I have decided, actually a few years ago, I decided to never let we talked about this before interfere with us talking about it again, because we have a perpetually new audience, I hope. And hopefully we can produce some evergreen content. Buzzwords, buzzword, buzzword. So we're going to talk about network attached storage. What is a NAS? Well, it's storage attached to your network. Complicated. There's a
All right. See y'all next week.
there's a couple of ways that you can do that. I mean, the obvious big iron way to do it is through this fancy thing called eSATA, which is a serial attached transport adapter SATA. I don't remember, but it's something like that. It basically, over a gigabit Ethernet port, the gigabit is fast enough to simulate a direct connection to a computer. So you can have your storage anywhere, really. I mean, ideally on the same LAN, because when you go out over the internet, things slow down, even if you have a great big connection. But you can have your data anywhere and not be physically attached to your computer anymore. So that came about in the last 8 years or so. It's relatively new in technology, but in computer terms, 8 years is a long time. So network attached storage has been around for a while. It just recently became sort of affordable to the regular guys. And if you've got a router that is a little more than the blue box D-Link router, if you've got something that has maybe 6 antennas sticking out of it and looks like an alien, you probably have a USB port on it. That USB port, you can plug a hard drive into it, boom, NAS. By definition, you have storage attached to your network. So those are the two sort of in-house NASs. And the third one is cloud storage, Google Drive, Dropbox, Amazon S3, that are mapped to your local hard drive as if they were local. So, for example, on a Linux drive, on a Linux computer, it's pretty easy to just map something. So you've got your home partition, you've got your root partition, you've got your whatever partition, and you've got your network storage partition, and it functions the same. It's going to be a little slower probably if you're out in the cloud. And then, honestly, I've never tried it in Windows, but I assume there's some utility like that where you can just map it to the N drive for network, and you're attached to your Amazon S3 or your Google Cloud. So technically, that's NAS as well. You don't need the big iron anymore. You don't need 7 independent disks or set up in a RAID 6 format. You can have that, and Miles, I think you do have that. We can talk a little bit about that, but you don't need it anymore. NAS has come home in such a way as you can just essentially make Dropbox. I mean, Dropbox in its simplest form is NAS, because there's a folder on your desktop, and what you put there gets copied up to the cloud. It's not technically stored in the cloud; it's copied to the cloud. There's a fine line there, but in the the dumbest sense, you could call Dropbox a NAS. So there's my quick introduction. What do you guys have to say?
Well,
go ahead, Miles. I'll let you go first.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting you bring Dropbox up because they had an IPO this week. And so now they're going to be a public company or something. But yeah, I'm old school. So I like servers and hard drives and backups and heavy power consuming devices that make lots of noises and stuff like that. That's me. And I share that out to my network using a variety of protocols, and my set-top boxes and computers and everything else shares that storage. So I go the old school way. I know what do you do, Seth?
I mean, I don't really keep a lot of stuff on the network. I use cloud stuff, or I have a portable flash drive. But sometimes I will just I will UNC into a different computer and just access the files that way. And a very easy way today to make a NAS is just you have a computer that's on. If you're in the Windows world, you can all have the same work group name, and then you can just create a file there and map a drive to it, and then boom, you've got NAS. Because these days, who doesn't? I mean, computers are so ridiculously cheap, and people fall prey to the, oh my gosh, I need more, when actuality 95% of the population doesn't need half the computer they use. So you can have an old computer be your network attached storage. It could be connected via Wi-Fi or via copper. And so, that's another easy, doable, you don't need to be a techie to create a network attached storage.
Yeah. And so what you just described there, the pedant net is out there. They're saying that's a server, Seth. That's a computer with an operating system serving part of its hard drive. Well, yeah, that's what all NASs are. Computers have just gotten so small now that you can create a single-purpose computer and put it on a chip the size of a postage stamp and attach it to the hard drive and call it a NAS. That's all a NAS is. It's a single-purpose computer. It's essentially a server. It just doesn't have to be running a full-blown OS.
Yeah, even every NAS has some type of, okay, granted, it probably doesn't have Windows. It's running some stripped down, customized version of Linux that gives you just enough operating system to be able to pull and recognize an IP address and recognize credentials and, share itself out to the web. So all really NAS, you can't really have NAS apart from a server world. You might not call it a server, but it's a server.
Right. And so people out there, particularly the Linux tinkerers, like to take these old beige box PCs that we have laying around, these Pentium 150 megahertz machines that are still laying around, and repurpose those. And that's certainly a nice project and something you can do. But that power supply in an off state uses more power than would a NAS system. At full. I mean, they just weren't built for efficiency back then. You could run 15 Raspberry Pis for the same as that switching power supply turned off, not even turned on. They're consuming power when they're in an off state. So it's green. It's for the planet to consider buying some new stuff. Plus, it's fun.
It's for the children.
It is. It's for the children.
It's actually for my wallet. This is a really sensitive topic with me right now because we're actually prepping half of our roof for solar right now. And, living in Arizona, you do that, right? I mean, duh. But anyway, the amount of solar that a solar panel can generate is obviously less than the house. So I'm going to have a deficit. I'm going to pay for power. And my wife and I sat down this morning and we sort of thought, what exactly can we do to reduce our power requirements for sizing the solar array? And one of the biggest contributors are all these stupid computers I got lying around in my office that all take power. So I took my NAS out to my workbench and plugged it on a kilowatt meter, and it's got, I guess it's got about 6-8 terabyte hard drives in it, something like that. And check the drawer on the thing, and I'm pulling nearly 450 watts. And I'm looking at going, what? I could be mining like 2 GPUs running Ethereum mining right there. But actually what it is about $40 a month of power cost. So yeah, it makes having a NAS quite a liability. That's a good point. And all those computers behind you there, you add all that up, that's going to be pretty big too.
His wife might hear.
Yeah, the older, the more likely, especially those old CRTs, they're pulling some serious wattage here.
Yeah, but you're an American.
What do you do?
So anyway, that's what that's the mechanics of what a NAS is. And as Miles talked about, he's got his multi terabyte array, and you pay a premium for that in a lot of ways. You're paying for the power. You're also paying for your expertise. You paid a big chunk of money for the hardware to put that in there. It could be a whole lot cheaper if you farm that out to the cloud. Maybe in the short run, I don't know, over the long term, you may break even, but it's definitely not a net loss to move things out to the cloud. And so my thinking is, in this world of Google Fiber and Google Drive and things like that, is there any reason for local NAS anymore? I know people, the first thing you're going to say is privacy, security. These things are secure, Dropbox being the exception, but there are ways to make Dropbox secure. It's easy to encrypt your files before you send it up there. But Google is very secure, and they have proven over time that even they can't get to your stuff. It's encrypted in such a way that it is, quote unquote, industry standard. So you're as secure as it will ever be living outside your network. But if you've got a NAS and it's inside your network and people can get into it from outside, there's kind of no difference there. So I kind of think that, like I have gigabit internet to my home. It's not really gigabit, but that's what they call it.
You have up to gigabit, Mark.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, let's face it. You have up to petabit. Let's just be real.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm crying about the supermodel with one hairy toenail. I have on an average day I get about 600 megs down. Boo-hoo. Poor me. But and I get about 800, 900 up. So I could easily operate an S3 cloud and have that function, because the hard drive in my the linkage, the network cable from the processor to my hard drive isn't gigabit. So that runs at about 300 megabits on most systems. So I literally have faster access to my files on the internet than to the files on my hard drive. With that being the case, and with that being the current state, it's only going to get better. Is there any reason to have NAS anymore?
Data caps.
That's a thing. I don't have any. But that doesn't mean that I won't, next year.
I'm a digital prepper. That's why.
I absolutely.
You have your own.
The same reason that you probably have a 50-gallon drum of potable water is
I do.
Yeah, is the same reason that you have your own local NAS.
Yeah, I'm the tin hat computer guy.
Because here's the thing: if you have your NAS, then it's your responsibility and it's your expertise to make sure that it's up. If you have your stuff stored somewhere else, then not only do you have to be responsible for your in-home network, where it's stored has to be responsible for their in-home network. And then you've got several other companies that are responsible to get it from one network to the other. So you have increased points of failure along the way.
But to use exactly your same argument, when I put something up on Google, I'm trusting a team of engineers with far more years of experience, and frankly, a lot smarter than I am, to safeguard my data. They're going to be better prepared to do. That's what they do. They are a team of server storage people that work for Google, for crying out loud. Their entire livelihood depends on 99.99999% uptime. And safeguarding my files is just one very small part, drop in their giant bucket of maintaining Google's data infrastructure. So my data is in much safer hands when I give it to Google.
Seems I heard Mark Zuckerberg say that about Facebook a couple of weeks ago. That didn't end well.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really talking about, but I'm just talking about you're being able to access it on demand. You've added many, many more points of failure to me saying, okay, I want to watch my wedding video now, or, my spouse wants to watch the wedding video now so I don't sleep on the couch. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Comcast is having a data outage. Well, usually I don't have Comcast, but the link between AT&T and Google uses Comcast. And so you had no idea, but now your stuff's down. So I'm not, and granted, very slight, but it's just, that's one of the things. If you want to be able to access your stuff when you want it, then when it's outside your control, it's outside your control.
Just a good example of that. This was many years ago. 10 at least years ago, probably closer to 15. I hosted my employer at the school I worked. I hosted all our own websites, our own data, that sort of thing, and I outsourced the DNS. Of course, we ran our own DNS in-house, but the primary thing was hosted at 3 different data centers, all housing geographically separate. There was East Coast, there was West Coast, and there was northern, I think it was close to Canada, Montana. It was in the country, but it was up in that area. And in complete freak coincidences, all 3 legs of that went down at the same time on the same day. And through no fault of my own, our site was completely inaccessible, and we were unable to access our own files that were stored on our own network because the DNS was routed out to these 3 independent legs of the internet that all went down. So the odds of that, I would have had better odds of getting struck by lightning twice on my way to pick up my winning lottery ticket than to have that happen, and yet it did happen. So, Point conceded, but my gosh, you got to consider the odds at some point.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It is, in all likelihood, it's not going to happen. But,
So what does our resident prepper have to say about that?
Well, I'm a digital hoarder too. So when you're a digital hoarder, and you're, a digital prepper, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to give Google 48 terabytes of stuff and say, "Here, I trust you. Don't be evil. Off you go." No. That's wave goodbye to your files right there.
And see, my faith is not in Google.
I got to keep it with me, man.
My faith is not in Google. My faith is in greed. Capitalism is what's going to protect my data, not Google. The reputation.
But we don't pay them anything.
No, but their entire business model relies on safeguarding data. Google is good at data, right? And when people don't believe that anymore, their business is hurt. Whether it's
Google was good at advertising.
Well, but they're advertising. They advertise that they're good at data.
Oh yeah.
So you bring up a good point, Miles and Seth. Actually, you both sort of stepped into that. You talked about access to your data. What is my data anymore? So the wedding video is a good example. There are one or two unique versions of that. Probably the videographer who recorded it might still have a copy, might not. I have a copy on VHS tape somewhere, and then I have the digital copy. So let's say there's 3 copies of that in the world. That is safely considered my data. But my movie collection, for example, how many copies of Thor: The Dark World exist out there? Mine is just one of them. And so is that really my data at that point? In fact, I think it was Dropbox. It was some company recently was saying that we will take, if you've got something out there like that, we'll just sort of checksum it. And if it matches what we've already got stored, we won't use your bandwidth cap, your storage cap. We'll just call that freebie because we've already got a copy of it. I think that company went out of business. Actually, it wasn't Dropbox. It was one of the Box.net or one of those guys. But that was their idea. They recognize that there's so much redundant data in the world that we'll just cache 1 or 2 copies of the redundant data and then just put a bookmark that says, "Oh yeah, Mark has this too." And I think for most people, most of their data isn't really their data. Most of their data is copies of some other people's data. Movies, music, books, examples.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I have LibreOffice on my computer. I have Word on my Windows tablet. I have all these things. And yet where do I do most of my writing for, like if I'm preaching a sermon or outlines for teaching class, it's in Google's, it's in Google Docs. Right. So, I mean, that's technically my data because I am creating it, but yet I have literally 1 copy of it and it's on Google Docs. I don't have 3 copies in 2 different locations. I have one. Now, of course, Google should have their stuff, redundantly and triplicate in, different worlds, time zones, and, phases of the universe. So it's probably secure.
You forgot different states of matter. They have a solid, liquid, and gas version as well.
Probably. But, I don't have access to it. So if I am somewhere and I don't have network connection, I can't access my data.
I'm in a lucky state because I can leverage off our business investments in our data centers and our servers and so on for my own personal use. It's kind of like a perk I get with the business I'm in. And I guess if I was to pay for all of that myself, it would be over the top expensive. But I have never paid a third party to store data on their network. I can't remember.
That's because third parties pay you to store data. You are as biased a sample as we could possibly find.
Yeah, I know. I realize I don't represent the norm, but I'm such a cheapskate when it comes to this stuff that I just don't want to spend money with Dropbox or Apple iCloud or whoever. And it's just because I don't need to. I can avoid that whole thing. Having said that, I've had situations where I've been on the other side of the planet trying to get a document in a government front teller thing, and I had to get it on my phone, and I was able to get it off my network over that environment. Whereas I guess I probably could have got it on a third party, but I don't know. There's just some part of it that makes me feel more safe and comfortable when I've got my data close at hand, and I just don't want to give it up.
So now, millennials, I appeal to you. If you're 21 years old let's say 25 years old. You're out of college. You're out in the world. You've got your first big boy job, and maybe a wife, and maybe a smaller version of you running around tripping over things. What do you consider your data? I would bet that we're 45-year-old fogies at this point. I would bet that we are so out of touch with the upcoming generation of people that, like my daughters, for example, my oldest is 15. She doesn't even have any concept of where things live. It's just on my phone. It's my thing, And when I get a new phone, I log in and boom, it's all there. It doesn't matter to her where anything is. And I think that we didn't grow up digitally native. Like, I can remember the first time I saw a microwave. That is not something that a 25-year-old can say. They have just always grown up with it. And then that's a 9-year-old, 10-year-old can't say the first time they saw a smartphone. They just don't. It's always been an embedded part of their life. They probably were entertained by a tablet when they were, a year or less old. So it's just part of their life. And I bet they don't even consider where stuff is anymore. So the concept of a NAS, the concept of putting my stuff anywhere, well, isn't that all in the cloud? Whatever the cloud is, isn't that all there? I think we're the last generation who's going to care one bit about where anything lives.
Well, I don't know. When Apple decides to cut the ties with Google and you log into iTunes and and all your Google apps are missing, then people will probably start caring again.
I don't know. Apple users probably not. Oh well, the mighty Apple decided I didn't need it anymore. I guess it was bad for me.
You bring up a good point, though. I think we're going to see a generation who do not, if you were to put an internal hard drive in front of them and say, what's that? They'd go, I don't know. It's a metal box. I don't know what it is. I think you're right. I don't think that the anatomy of the technologies which we probably embrace and have, it's become part of our DNA. I think that stuff is going away gradually. I think that, maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the concept of a car will be different. The concept of computer and storage will be different. There'll be so many assumptions of things because of simplicity and easy availability. But even with that, I still have to have, for me, it's a huge leap of faith, one that I cannot make, to trust a third party with stuff that is mission critical to me.
I agree with you. I am hung up on the concept of ownership. When I buy a digital download of a song, Google Play Store, wherever, I burn it to a CD, then rip that CD to MP3s and store it on my server, because then I own that. It doesn't matter that Amazon promises it'll always be available to me. That's how I do it. When I buy a DVD or a movie, like if I buy a movie on Google Play, I also look for that CD or that DVD probably years later when it's in the bargain bin. I'm always going through those bargain bins at Walmart looking for movies that I already own so that I can rip them and make my own copy of them. Because that again, it makes me feel comfortable and warm and fuzzy to know that it's all on that drive that lives in my living room. Except that drive in my living room crashed a couple of years ago, and I lost it all. Had I had it up in Google, I would still have that data. Instead, I had to go back and painstakingly re-rip all 400 plus of my DVDs over the course of several weeks, which I did because I'm hung up on ownership. But I really shouldn't have cared, because most of that stuff already exists on Netflix or on Google. It would have been, call it $200 to rebuy all of that stuff on Amazon or Google Play or whatever, because most of it's old. We're talking Breakfast Club. This is old stuff that I could probably pick up for $2. But instead of spending that couple $100, I spent 2 months of my life painstakingly re-ripping DVDs because I'm hung up on ownership.
But the problem is what's on Amazon Prime or Netflix today isn't what's on Amazon or Netflix next month.
True.
Because I had movies in Amazon Prime that, I want to watch this next one. I want to watch this. And so I go there and it's like, I see the stuff I've tagged for watch later, except now it's no longer free for Amazon Prime. Now I have to pay to watch it. So it's still there, but it's not free for Prime, so something that I was already paying for, now the data stored on the cloud is the same, but now it costs me extra to access it. Or when I had Netflix, I went to watch something and February 28th became March 1st, and the rest of the series was gone. And I was just like, and so just because, whereas if I had it, I would know that I have it, and it would still be there, and they just wouldn't have lost some licensing deal, and I missed out on seeing something I wanted. So
we're going to see this change, though. I mean, I think with IPFS is going to be a thing, and it's going to be something that will significantly change the landscape when it comes to digital storage, where everybody is going to be part of some sort of world hard drive, and we can put our stuff out there and know that it's safe because it's spread on a million different nodes across a network. So no one node is going to control it. So I think it's going to change for the better, and I don't think it's going to have a huge cost.
But see, that's again, scary for content creators.
Sorry,
that's scary for content creators. Like, let's take something that the fans are rabid about, the Beatles, right? The Beatles' White Album. People who love the Beatles have bought the White Album 7 times. They bought the album, then they bought the 8-track, then they bought the cassette, then they bought the CD, then they bought the MP3, then they bought the high-res MP3, then they bought the Google the iPhone iCloud version of it, whatever. So they have just bought this album over and over again. And if you're the Beatles or CBS, is that whoever owns the Beatles? I don't even know. That's a good thing. And so something like the interplanetary file system, that's just stupid. Call it Internet Protocol file system. That's what it really is. Something like IPFS scares these people to death because they won't be able to own it anymore.
And anybody else can grab it too if you want to give somebody an address to it. Yeah.
And so I just used the phrase like 4 times, I'm hung up on ownership. Maybe that's partly because I'm a content creator. I understand this from a content creator's standpoint. Piracy is always an issue, but the MPAA is, rabidly trying to sue their own fans out of existence. At least there's a single point of this stuff being held out there. Even in torrents, you could track the locations, but the IPFS and new technologies like that are making that anonymous, untraceable, and ephemeral. And any one node can go down without significantly affecting the system. So it's both going to be democratizing and frightening, depending on who you are.
Yeah, I think our culture's changed a lot, though, particularly in maybe the last 10 years. I mean, how many artists these days, other than big artists like, Taylor Swift and people like that, most artists below that tier, they're not making any money off recording their album and selling their music on iTunes because everyone doesn't go to iTunes and buy it anymore. They go to Spotify and they listen to it and they stream it. And at the end of the day, the artist gets nothing really. I mean, hardly anything at all. The artists nowadays, the new emerging artists are coming out and they are embracing Creative Commons and they're embracing, creating an audience by giving away their material and then hoping to reap the rewards of that using live concerts and merchandising and everything else.
And that's why when I was a kid, it cost $20 to go to a concert, and now it costs $120 to go to a concert. They've recognized that's where the money is.
Yeah, it is. It is. But at the end of the day, it still means that the musician or the independent movie creator or whatever, they're not getting anything because big corporate legal money grab is taking everything before they can get to it. So they want to be able to get to their fans. They want to be able to build a community, and they're not doing it using existing methods. So creating something for storage for long term, if they have to give it out for free, they're going to YouTube, right? They're giving it out on YouTube for free, and that's because that's where they can build their audience. And that's what I think the next generation is going to need. And so therefore, long-term storage, it's probably going to be a personal thing.
Yeah, you, Miles, and I both have some experience with the recording industry, and we know that the stranglehold has always been distribution. The production company says, we have distribution. If you want to be heard, if you want your stuff to be released worldwide, you have to sign a punitive deal with us. And that's why every band that makes it big immediately tries to break the contract before they release a second album, because that first album, $600 million was made on it. They made none of that. In fact, I have heard of artists ending their tour in debt to the studio because their tour costs exceeded their royalties on the album. That distribution method that's the fist that has been held tight. And now it's gone. It's crumbling. And YouTube, and the D-Tube and the new things like that are going to make distribution so democratized that the gatekeepers aren't going to have a gate to keep anymore.
Right. And so I think ultimately, to pull this back to NAS or storage, this is where I do have a great deal of faith in IPFS, because I think at the end of the day, it's a permanent record. It's got a blockchain. It's in the cloud, and it's stored on everybody's computer who participates in the network. And it's not in like BitTorrent, you can identify the IP address of who's sharing something or who's downloading it. In this case, you can't. It's just bits of it spread everywhere, and no one knows who's got what. And it's a far different model. And I think at the end of the day, this is going to become the future of NAS.
We need to do a show about IPFS, but it's so infantile right now. I have kind of held off on that, but we probably need to do that in this calendar year.
Okay.
So take that as homework. All right, Seth, we got about 2 minutes left in this segment. What are your final thoughts?
I just intellectually, I'm all for the concept of a NAS, but I don't have really any data to worry about keeping.
And most people don't.
Yeah. Photos they're embedded in Facebook. And so we all know that, Facebook is the pillar of altruism, and they're all about my best interests. Same thing with Google, and they're on my phone. And so it's not that I don't have stuff. It's that, theoretically I care, but when you get right down to it, I simply don't care. My portable hard drive, I hardly ever use anymore. But I still have it. So yay. And I don't know.
You're not unusual in that. Most people don't have any data. Most people aren't generators of data. Most people are consumers of data only, and so it doesn't matter where the data is as long as they can consume it. There's just not a lot of creators in the world. In my case, I'm a content creator at my work, but I don't own any of that. Everything I create by contract belongs to them. I don't care where it's stored. My personal stuff, this show, for example, I do care about that. But most people aren't creators. We have lost that creator thread for about a generation. I'm hoping the maker thread is going to pick that up, but I don't know that it will.
Yeah, and I use Google Cloud for my stuff that I create. It's saved in documents in Google Drive. So. Yeah.
So I have a couple of single terabyte drives, or 1 and 2 terabyte drives. I've got a couple of drives laying around my house that are plugged in and are technically NAS. The rest of it I keep on Dropbox and Google Drive. And, as much as I just went into that whole thing about I'm hung up on ownership, most of my stuff lives somewhere else. The stuff I care most about, I keep close to me. But even that I usually back up to the cloud because I trust the cloud more than I trust my living room. Miles trusts the living room more than anything else.
Yeah, pretty much. It's interesting when you were talking about that. I was thinking to myself, well, I don't want to be stuck on a single position and not willing to negotiate off it. I'm trying to work out from a cost standpoint, what is the cost of storing stuff on hard drives in your own home, the cost of power to run the enclosures or computers that control it, and then the risk factor of what is the 8% failure rate that hard drives have, and the cost of replacing it. I mean, it is significant. I guess when you add it all up, it's probably maybe over 3 or 4 or 5 years, you spend $500, maybe $1,000 or something on this. If you divide that down per month, it probably makes Dropbox quite a economical option.
Right.
I don't know.
It all comes down to control. Well, that's really what it's about. How much are you willing to pay to control your own data?
Yeah. So
now, Seth, what happened this week in history?
All right, Mark. Wanted to let everybody know that on This Week in History, March the 22nd, 1960, freaking laser beams are patented. So the first patent on a laser is issued to Arthur Leonard, I can't even pronounce his last name, Shaklau, maybe, and Charles Hardtowns, who assigned it to Bell Telephone Laboratories. But to this day, still no one has figured out how to attach these bad boys to the heads of sharks. So But anyway, that happened this week in history. And now back to you, Mark.
And cats everywhere have been tormented for years as a result of it.
And that's from Austin Powers, just for people who didn't get the reference.
I want to see a laser cannon at some point used in aggression,
Light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Laser. I learned that when I was a kid, and so I'm saying that now. And they have yet to be weaponized because they're freaking dangerous when they get that big. Yes, they will destroy your target, but they'll destroy everything between you and your target, good or bad. And if you're not careful, destroy you too. I did see a guy on YouTube who put like 15 consumer-grade lasers behind a magnifying glass and created this freaking huge laser, and it's like warnings all over YouTube that I am stupid, do not try this at home. He like melted a hole in his garage door with this thing. Don't do this, people. Leave it to the professionals. Lasers are nothing to be messed with. Railguns, on the other hand, build those at will.
That's right.
All right, now Seth, what do you have to lower my productivity, thus making you seem like a better hiring option?
Well, this will work really good on Windows systems. It's just a cheap, easy, fast game. So you start the game and you have to avoid the circles bigger than you, and go over the circle smaller than you, and the more circles you eat, the bigger you get. And it's nothing but a time waster. No great thing, but
that's anyway, what we pay you for.
This is hard.
It is, yeah. I think 64 is the highest I've gotten. Took me a while to understand what it means, but anyway, so just avoid the big circles, eat the circle smaller than you by controlling the circle with your mouse and moving it around the screen.
I've played lots of similar games like this, and they are crazy addictive after a while. There was one, I can't remember the name of it, but you're like this single-celled creature that, again, you have to eat other creatures, and then like you go deeper down into the, what we'll call it, the ocean as you go, and the things get bigger there, and eventually you're giant, and when you beat the boss, you explode up into a single-celled creature again, and you start all over. But it's I think it's called Flow in Games, if I remember correctly. Same sort of thing, but it was just really I like this one. When you lose, it says "You dead."
Yep,
that's funny. You dead. Of course, if you make a misjudgment about whether you're bigger than the other guy, that's the real problem. Because I thought I had him. Nope, he was just a little bit bigger than me.
Yeah, and it took me a while to realize that whenever you consume a circle, you grow. And
right.
So, whenever you do the little circles, you grow by so small, you don't realize it. But then you get to bigger circles, and it gets harder to avoid stuff.
If you're not watching the video right now, you're missing out because nobody's making eye contact with the camera. We're all playing this game as we talk.
I just want some laser beams on this thing.
Just some freaking lasers. Throw me a bone here. So this is the part of the show where I tell you how you can comment to us, feedback to us, let us know what you have to say. You can do that by going to elementop.com elementop.com. Click the contact us button at the top of the page. Fill out the world's hardest CAPTCHA, answer the world's hardest CAPTCHA rather. Fill out the form there and click submit. That will go to my in basket, and it will get what's the word? Priority there. I just can't think and talk at the same time. You can also dial 559-IM-OPI, leave us a voicemail. Haven't had one of those in a while. Or you can send an email to geekrant@elementop.com. That goes to all three of us, lest you think I am filtering you your right to free speech so that you can say whatever you want to these other guys. I am filtering that. So
82 points. Woohoo.
All right, Seth, we know what he was doing with his time there. So let us know what you think. Tell us what we're doing well, what we're doing badly. I am interested in hearing millennials take on what we were talking about. Let's face it, guys, we're all sort of out of touch here. We are, we're admittedly geeks. By definition, we're sort of out of the mainstream, and we're aging geeks. There's definitely some gray in the beards here. So I need my audience to tell me what's hep with the young kids these days. What's that hep jive? That's real kid talk, right? Let us know.
You got it, Daddy-o.
Word to your mother. because I'm screet like that, yo. Just let us know what you think, because it's important that we sort of stay in touch. If nothing else, I want to be able to ridicule the snowflakes. No, I didn't. Sorry, that was inside voice. I didn't mean to say that out loud. Let us know what you think about the show. Also, we covet your support. There are a couple of ways that you could do that. Obviously, you can tell your friends about us, preferably the people you like. Tell them that you like the show. Don't tell people you hate that you hate the show so that you wish they would go spend an hour and waste their life. Don't do that. What I would say is, if you like the show, tell everybody you know. If you don't like the show, tell me. And maybe I'll fix it. So that's the best thing you can do to support us, is tell other people about it. The second most important thing you can do about it, and these are in order, is you can leave us a review and a rating on whatever podcast delivery system you prefer. iTunes is still the standard, whether we like it or not. But, Last FM, Stitcher Radio. I don't even know what. There's so many of them out there. However you get this podcast, unless, of course, you go to my website and click the play button, and then in which case leaving a review there doesn't help much. But leave us a rating and a review. That is certainly beneficial. And then the third, and I do put this in that order, is give us money. Money is always a good thing. You can do that by going to patreon.com/Alan. That's my favorite, because I now have to produce content before I get paid. If you use the tip jar on the website, that's awesome. If you do a recurring thing there, I get that every month without fail, no matter what. I certainly appreciate that. But the thing I like most about Patreon is it's a pay-for-play situation. If I don't produce content, I don't get money. So that seems to be the thing that works out the best either way. And the rake is about the same. They take about the same as what PayPal takes. So if you could do that, alamanopi.com/Patreon is the way to do it. Now, gentlemen, any final words of wisdom before we say goodnight?
Nope.
Crickets.
And that's why they're the best in the business, ladies and gentlemen. Always ready with a quick word and a heartfelt bit of wisdom. Thank you, listener, for hanging out with us. Thank you, Miles Seth, for being the best I could afford on what I pay you. And I look forward to talking to you next week, because that's it for this episode of the GeekRant.
Toodaloo.
Got it.
All right. And that was like right at 51-ish minutes. We're getting pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time we talked about this, we were all anti-cloud, pro keeping it on your network and controlling it. You've sold out to the man.
I just have more time than money, or more money than time these days. That's the difference. When you're young, you got more time than money. When you're old, you got more money than time.
Yep.
Well, we brought all angles on that argument. I mean, I'd be curious to find out what other people are doing. I don't think, like you said about millennials, my daughter, I guess she watches stuff on her computer a lot, but it's Netflix, it's YouTube, it's that stuff. Nothing ever stays resident and persists on her storage.
Nor does she care. She doesn't care where anything is, right?
Yeah, I gave her I think it was a 250 gig or a 500 gig hard drive in her laptop, thinking, oh, well, she's going to bring this thing back and I'll replace it with some M2 thing with a terabyte or whatever. She brings it back over at home over Christmas or whenever it was. And I'm like, well, you need me to look over your computer and just, spruce it up a bit. And I look at it, she's used 100 gigs. And most of it are projects from college. So they don't store squat.
Yeah, I used to buy movies that I wanted, and now, honestly, I don't care anymore. It's just like, I'll watch it whenever. And if I don't know. I don't care about owning movies and stuff like I used to.
Yeah,
so maybe I matured.
In most of my drives, once I started going to SSDs, they're so much more expensive. I think my biggest one's a 300 gig drive, and I don't have any of them full. Yeah. But again, I have that terabyte network storage. I've got two or 3 terabytes total. I don't even know, but that's where I keep anything I really care about.
Yeah.
All right, YouTube people, I started late, so I gave you some extra content. Sorry, you didn't miss much, just a little bit of bad poetry. But now you got to go back and listen to it when it's released on Wednesday. That's your penance for not going to the website and downloading it. See you later.